In this lesson you will learn how to solve proportions. A proportion is when you have an equal sign in between two fractions. And the way you solve a proportion is you cross multiply. You take the product of A times D and set it equal to the product of B times C. So once your fraction is removed, you just use algebra to solve for the variable. So the directions are to solve each proportion and express your answers as a mixed number or as a fraction in simplest terms. So since 5 over 8, one fraction, is equal to x over 32, another fraction, I'm going to use cross multiplication. So I'm taking 8 times x, which is 8x, and I'm setting it equal to 5 times 32. 5 times 32 is 160. So once your cross multiplication is complete, you just solve for the variable. 8 is being multiplied by x, so I divide both sides by 8 so that x is equal to 20. For number 2, 6 over 25 equals 32 over x. So to cross multiply, I take 6 times x and get 6x and set it equal to 25 times 32. It doesn't matter which product you start with. I usually start with the one that has the variable. So when you take 25 times 32, 25 times 32 is 800. And when you divide by 6, you have x is equal to 800 over 6. And since both of these numbers are even, I'm going to divide them both by 2 so that I get 400 over 3. So 400 over 3 is the answer as an improper fraction, but the directions ask us to write it as a mixed number. So I'm going to take 3 and divide it into 400. And I'm just going through long division. And since I have a remainder left of 1, I can write my answer as x is equal to 133 1/3. For number 3, 1.2 over x equals 24 over 30. So I'm going to start with the product that has the variable 24x, and then I take the product of 1.2 times 30, and 1.2 times 30 is equal to 36. And to solve for x, I divide both sides by 24 so that x is equal to 36 over 24, which is a fraction, but it's not reduced. Since both 36 and 24 are divisible by 12, I can divide them both by 12 and get 3 over 2. But since 3 over 2 is an improper fraction, I want to rewrite it as a mixed number. This one's much shorter, and I have 1 and 1/2. So my value for x is equal to 1 and 1/2. For number 4, a 6-foot tall man casts a shadow that is 9 feet long. So if I draw a picture of this first sentence, you have a 6-foot tall man and a shadow I'm going to draw on the ground, which is 9 feet long, and at the same time a nearby flagpole casts a shadow that is 60 feet long. So if this is my flagpole, this would be the flagpole's shadow, which is 60 feet long. If they're asking us to find the height of the flagpole, that's going to be my x. So the way you're going to solve this is you're going to set up a proportion. The taller the object, the longer the shadow. So I'm going to write a proportion of the man of his height, which is 6, to his shadow, which is 9. So in the numerator I have the man's height, in the denominator I have the man's shadow. So in my other fraction, since I have height in the numerator of the man, I have to have height in the numerator of the flagpole. And once you have your proportion set up, you just cross multiply. And I always start with the product that has the variable. So 9 times x is 9x, and then 6 times 60 is 360. So that when I divide both sides by 9, the 9's cancel, and I get x is equal to 40. So since this is a word problem, and they're asking us for how tall the flagpole is, I would write 40 feet. For number 5, a recipe requires 2/3 a cup of brown sugar to make 20 cookies. How much brown sugar is required to make 35 cookies? So I'm going to write this out as 2/3 a cup of brown sugar is for 20 cookies. Since we're being asked to find how much brown sugar is needed for 35 cookies, I'm going to put x here to represent the brown sugar for 35 cookies. So my proportion will start out with the amount of brown sugar for 20 cookies. So it's 2/3 a cup for 20 cookies. So this may look more complicated because you have a fraction within a fraction, but I'm going to solve it the same way. 2/3 is the numerator, which represents the amount of brown sugar for 20 cookies. So x has to be the numerator for the second fraction because it represents the brown sugar for 35 cookies. Once you have your proportion set up, even with this fraction of 2/3, you still cross multiply so that you have 20x equals 2/3 times 35. So if I work that out on the side, 2/3 times 35, I'm going to write 35 over 1 and multiply straight across, which is 70 over 3. So 20x is equal to 70 over 3. So to finish this, since I have a 20 in front of the x, I want to divide both sides by 20. So when I divide both sides by 20, I'm going to divide on the side 70 over 3 divided by 20 over 1. Just use the rules of fractions, and the rules of fractions for dividing is to take the second fraction and multiply by the reciprocal. So 70 over 3 times 1 over 20, the zeros cancel, and we get 7 over 6. So x is equal to 7 over 6. And if I write 7 over 6 as a mixed number, I just divide 6 into 7, and I have 1 and 1/6. So x is equal to 1 and 1/6, and our x represented the amount of cups of brown sugar, so it's 1 and 1/6 cups of brown sugar. For number 6, triangle ABC is similar to triangle DEF. Find the value of x. When two triangles are similar, it means that their sides are in proportion. So if I take triangle ABC, segment AB, 2.4, is in proportion to side DE because the two letters come first in each triangle, AB and DE. Side BC is in proportion to side EF because the two letters come second in the way that the two triangles are written above. So since the 2.4 corresponds to the x, I'm going to write the first fraction as 2.4 over x and set it equal to 5.7 over 1.9. So once you have your proportions set up, you cross multiply. 5.7 times x is just 5.7x. And then when we take 2.4 times 1.9, we get 4.56. And to solve for x, I divide both sides by 5.7. And 4.56 over 5.7, I'm going to move my decimal point over once so that I have x is equal to 45.6 over 57, and if I take 57 into 45.6, 8 times 57 is 456. So this decimal point carries up, and I get x is equal to 0.8, but since 0.8 represented the side of the triangle, and the sides of this triangle are measured in feet, I will say that x is equal to 0.8 feet.
For number 7, this is a more difficult type of proportion, but the concept is still the same. When you have a fraction equal to a fraction, you want to start by cross multiplying, and it doesn't matter which diagonal you start with. So when you take 9 times the x plus 12, just make sure that you write that x plus 12 in parentheses. Then place your equal sign and take the other product of 9x times 5, which is 45x. Now you have an equation that involves a distributive property. So 9 times x is 9x, and 9 times 12 is 108. And to solve this equation, I'm going to subtract the 9x from both sides, so that I'm left with 108 is equal to 36x And when I divide both sides by 36, I get 3 is equal to x, which is the same as x equals 3. So for number 8, x over 20 equals x minus 4 over 5. Once again, I have a proportion, one fraction equal to another, so I start by cross multiplying. And I'm going to start with the 20 times the x minus 4. And when I write that, you want to make sure that that x minus 4, because it has two terms, you want to put it in parentheses, and then write your equal sign, and then take the product of x and 5, which is 5x. So now your fraction is gone, and you want to solve this equation using the distributive property on the left. So 20x minus 80 equals 5x. And to solve for x, I'm going to move the 20x over to the right side. And I'm left with negative 80 equals negative 15x. And next I divide by negative 15 so that x is equal to negative 80 over negative 15. And since both of them are negative, the negatives cancel, so that I have 80 over 15. To simplify this fraction, since both numbers are divisible by 5, the 80 ends in a 0 and the 15 ends in a 5, so I know that 5 will work. I divide both numbers by 5 to get 16 over 3. So if I change this into a mixed number, I have 5 and 1/3, so x is equal to 5 and 1/3. And the last problem, number 9, 18 plus x over 14 minus x equals 3 over 7. So once again, it doesn't matter which diagonal you start with. So 3 times 14 minus x, I have to write the 14 minus x in parentheses. And when I take the product of the other diagonal, 7 times 18 plus x, you have two groups of parentheses. So there will be distributing on both sides of the equation. 3 times 14 is 42, and then minus 3x. And then on the right side, 7 times 18 and 7 times x. 7 times 18 is 126. So now my equation has 42 minus 3x equals 126 plus 7x. I'm going to start by combining the x's, and I'm going to move the 3x over to the right. 42 equals 126 plus 10x. And my next step is to subtract 126 from both sides, because I want to get the x by itself. And 42 minus 126 is negative 84. And my last step, when I divide both sides by 10, I get x is equal to negative 84 over 10. And since both numbers are even, I will start by dividing both numbers by 2, so that I get negative 42 over 5. And if I convert this into a mixed number, have 8 and 2/5. So my answer for x is x equals 8 and 2/5.